This is extraordinarily important in lots of ways. I'm going to give you ideas. Some of you know this and some of you don't. I think I've talked about this already. So there's two views here on the economy. And I'm going to put left and right. But in fact, that's just a generic term. These terms don't mean as much in 1930s as they do today. Today they mean a great deal. Okay? So they're different definitions. It's okay. But when I mean left and right, what you're usually talking about is change, right? In this case, it would be tradition. This will be helpful a little bit. So when we are looking at tradition, we're looking at the economy as it is before 1932. Well, who have we had in the office? Well, basically from Lincoln, well, we've had mostly Republicans, except for who are the two exceptions? Cleveland, Wilson. Everybody else is Republican. And recently, in the 20s, who are all Republicans? We have Harding. He dies. Coolidge, he doesn't, but he does not take a second term, which says a lot about his philosophy. And we have Hoover. Now, the funny thing about Coolidge in the second term, what is Harding known for? We talked about this right before the exam, when we were talking about the 20s. What is he known for, aside from going up to Alaska, dying and being dead?
He cut taxes.
Not yet. That's Coolidge. Coolidge is definitely going to cut taxes.
He didn't. He wasn't very big on public finances.
No, that's Coolidge too. You guys are remembering Coolidge well. I'm happy. Teapot Dome scandal, right? And so when you read any textbook, they're always going to talk about the Teapot Dome scandal. The problem is it occurs during his administration, but he dies before it hits the public. I mean, literally, we're talking weeks. He dies, boom, this comes up. But the events had already been brewing probably 6 months before that. It just didn't hit the news. So Coolidge comes into the office. He's not elected. He comes in, and this is the first thing that hits him, this big scandal. And I don't know if you remember the scandal. I mentioned it real quickly. It had to do off in Wyoming or Montana, I can't remember which state, a western state. The federal government had lands. The guy who was in charge of the federal lands, he got a sweetheart deal to some oil company. So he let them mine the rights of the lands, and in exchange, he got money. It's a bribe, basically, right? Big scandal. Now, part of the reason for this is that after World War I, there's so much money going to the federal government. Before World War I, not so much money going to the federal government. But World War I amplified the federal government's ability to kind of coordinate the economy, because you have to in order to be able to send all those troops to Europe. And so tons of money coming through the Congress, through the government. And this guy off in Montana, the guy who's responsible for the federal lands, he takes this kickback because there's so much money coming in, nobody notices it. Well, it's a big, giant scandal. Harding's dead. Coolidge has to deal with this, and Coolidge, this is totally his philosophy. First thing he does is he says, we are going to clean up government. Okay? Clean up government. This was one of the major points that we were making right before your second exam. That for Coolidge, reform means restraint. So if we're going to clean up government, one of the things we do is we don't spend as much money. We don't have as much money coming through. He fires everybody that was associated with the Teapot Dome scandal. He hires this guy named J. Edgar Hoover. We didn't have the FBI then, but in what's called the Bureau of Information, which will become the FBI. And his goal is to be as clean-cut and as non-corrupt as you could possibly get. So he's got reform internally within his bureaucracy. And then the other thing is he lowers taxes. This is a funny thing, because I'm going to tell you, he was not in favor of zero taxes. Very much against it. Why, do you think?
There has to be some government in the government.
Close, close. But remember, we didn't have personal income taxes until, what, 1913. But he thought everyone should have some taxes, but not very much.
Public responsibility.
you got skin in the game, right?
Oh.
If you don't pay taxes, and you know you're not going to pay taxes, do you have any problem saying, hey, we should raise taxes?
No.
No, because are you going to be affected by it? Let's put huge amounts of taxes on people that make $50,000, $60,000 a year or $100,000 a year. Well, you don't make that much money, right? So are you affected by it at all? You don't pay any taxes at all. He didn't believe that you should have zero. You should always have some taxes. But he argued lower taxes, because if you lower the taxes, then the federal government will not be tempted with all this money coming through. And he also said no spending. So lower the spending. Now, here's a funny thing, and I mentioned this right before class. He lowered taxes. What happened to the revenue? Revenues, the money coming into the federal government. It increased.
Because business was good.
It didn't necessarily solve, but you're right, it's huge business. Now, he didn't mind this because that money meant that the business was increasing, and so then the economy was very, very healthy. And he made the argument it's because we are reformed. We have a reform agenda. And the reform agenda is for the United States government not to be as involved. Well, obviously, what is FDR's argument here? FDR's argument, not Coolidge. Coolidge, in 1928, they say, "Are you going to run again?"
Nope.
I will not run a second term. That's it. No explanation, no speech, no nothing. And would he have won the second term?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's no question. He was extremely popular. But he later said nobody should run. Nobody should be president for 10 years. Nobody should be more than 10 years. It's just too much. And he would have been 10 years. He said no, nobody should be president that long. So Hoover. Now, where do we remember Hoover from? Do you remember Hoover?
Hoover Dam, Hooverville.
That's later. Hooverville. That's 32. What do we remember Hoover before all that? How about Hoover is the one who was responsible for managing the Red Cross after World War I.
Nope, did not know that.
Yep. So he basically fed Europe. He was known in 28. He ran on being a humanitarian. He was in charge of the Commerce Department. Okay? The Commerce Department, very strongly connected with the economy. And he was famous for being the guy who fed Europe. Why is this kind of funny to know that? Because, what was it you mentioned, Hoover? What is Hooverville?
Hooverville is a myth of everyone dying in the streets during the Great Depression.
It is a myth?
The slumvilles.
Okay. It is...
Slum towns.
It is political rhetoric. Who comes up with the term Hooverville? Yeah. The people do not. You need to understand. This is not something that people say. Hey, Hoover's responsible. This is FDR's campaign rhetoric. Hooverville is basically a homeless camp. Right? It's a homeless camp. And so FDR was saying, look at those Hoovervilles. So if you call them Hoovervilles, who's responsible for them?